How's it going, everyone? Jeff here again with Modders Inc. Cougar has updated their line of the Attack X3 mechanical keyboards for 2018, and the introduction of the Speedy will be met with quite a bit of excitement. The Attack X3 RGB Speed retains much of what made it a popular keyboard for the last couple of years. The aluminum backplate, solid construction, excellent build quality, and of course, per-key RGB backlighting. We'll start out with what makes the Speedy different from previous versions of the X3, and that's the inclusion of the new Cherry MX Speed Silver key switches. While very similar to the Cherry MX Red switches that have been popular with gamers for a number of years, the silver switches have a much shorter actuation point of just 1.2mm versus 2mm on the Reds. Cherry says these two switches use the same spring, but because of the shallower overall travel, I felt the key press was slightly heavier as compared to those Cherry MX Reds. I'm going to start out this review with, I'm not typically a fan of the Cherry MX Red or linear switches in general, and I wasn't expecting much on the usability side of this keyboard, and boy, was I wrong. The new Speed Silver switches are a joy both to game and type on. One of my biggest gripes with linear switches is the low actuation force typically required of them, and it causes me to be a little bit sloppy when doing anything besides gaming. I'm not sure what the difference was on the Attack X3 Speedy, as on paper these should be very similar to a Cherry MX Red, but I was much more accurate on this board than I expected to be. Walking around the Attack X3, the board features a very sharp-looking brushed aluminum panel behind the keycaps. It adds a bit of rigidity to the keyboard and also a bit of pop to the RGB lighting between the keys. The underside of the Attack X3 reveals 4 rubber feet, 2 of which flip down for angle adjustment on the keyboard. The pads work great on the 2 desks that I tried them on, with no slipping or sliding during either typing or gaming. There's also a detachable palm rest included, with further removable FPS pad, which lifts your left hand even higher for your WASD action. The RGB lighting on this board is fantastic. There are 9 preset effects accessible on the keyboard through use of the function and F1 through 4 keys. These effects are also editable through Cougar's UIX software. Macro recordings are also available, and up to 30 can be stored on the keyboard's onboard memory. And the really nice thing is the effects and macros are persistent to the keyboard. No need to run software to have access to them. Simply load them on the keyboard and use them on any computer you'd like. While the Cougar UIX software does allow you to control some very fine details of this keyboard, I actually found it a bit tedious to create my own custom lighting effects. The problem with per-key backlighting is you have to configure the backlighting per key, and Cougar has no way to select multiple keys, groups, sections, or any other methods that might speed things up for you. The interface is also just a little bit clunky, not displaying what window is actually active, and some weird UI elements that seem overly flashy and not intuitive. It's not unusable, but it's certainly not the easiest thing I've ever used either. The build quality overall of the Attack X3 RGB Speedy is excellent, and I'm digging the speed switches, as I mentioned, quite a bit more than I thought I would. But keyboards are entirely subjective, and each person uses them differently. So the next part is my personal thoughts on the use of this keyboard. The key layout and spacing felt very natural to me. Nearly everything was exactly where I expected it to be. I say nearly because I rely a great deal on the use of the Windows button to the left of the spacebar, both in Windows and OS X for hotkeys. On the Cougar X3, that key is the function button to trigger keyboard functions, such as changing the RGB effects, running macros, or using your media hotkeys. The Windows key on the Attack X3 is off to the right of the spacebar. Now, I understand why they put it there from a gaming perspective. You don't want to move your hand away from your home WASD position to use the macro. And unfortunately, the function button is the only one you're not able to remap through Cougar software. It's stuck right where it is. So, for me, this turns this keyboard into a gaming-only affair, as my productivity was hampered by this. Again, your results may vary, but it is something to keep in mind if you use your computer for both gaming and productivity. The RGB lighting, as I mentioned, looks awesome on this board, but a few of the effects fall a little bit short for me. The rain, as you see here, looks fantastic, as does the rainbow effect, the wave, and the rest of the static effects. For me, it's the reactive that seemed to miss the mark. The problem isn't that they don't look good with a single key press. I especially like the ripple effect. The problem is, with a second key press, the first effect that you set in motion changes color to match the new effect. That's fine some of the time, but the faster you press keys, the more you go from a good-looking wave to the worst-looking RGB strobe light you've ever seen. And even the hardest of the hardcore RGB enthusiasts would start thinking to themselves, it might be time to tone this down. So to wrap up, when you're shopping for a keyboard, build quality, feel, and consistency usually will make a keyboard a winner in my book. The Cougar Attack X3 RGB Speedy certainly checks all those boxes. Sure, there's a few things that could be polished up on the software side, and a few lighting effects that I'm not a fan of, but that really doesn't diminish what is a very good gaming keyboard. And as long as you like the comfort and the layout of this keyboard, it should do quite well on your desk at home. Let me know down in the comments, what are you guys typing on? I'm always curious to hear other people's keyboard preferences. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe on the way down there. Make sure to check out our Amazon store down in the video description for anything you might need for your next build or upgrade. Thank you everyone for watching this one. As always, I'm Jeff, and I'll see you in the next video.